Okay. 6 p.m. We'll start the presentation. Our first presenter's not here, but I think Mr. Pope is going to talk about it.
So first up are some exterior stucco repairs at City Hall. I'm not sure how many years ago, but prior to our new windows and prior to our bond and renovation of City Hall, we knew that we had to do some work to the stucco on the outside of the building. But right about the same time we got into that, we decided to do the windows through a grant. It took some time to get and install. So we put the money in reserve, and it's just kind of been pushed off. The money is there in reserve. We have, I believe, about $275,000 in that account for exterior stucco repairs. So as soon as we wrapped up the interior of the building, we got to work. We hired the same architects to come back and examine the exterior of the building. And here is the man himself.
Oh yeah, well you're up.
Oh, up already? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We've already destroyed the presentation, but come on.
All right.
Yeah. And if you want, I'll keep going and I'll hand you this, and then you can correct me if I misspeak.
Sure.
So
How's everybody see?
This is Ben Weiner, part of the team. We've been working on this project.
You're welcome to use that.
Actually,
This is the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just got done with existing,
Okay.
describing the history of it, so you can go straight into the
I mean, I don't mind.
You know what the
Present. I mean, I know this stuff, so I don't need it. So you showed the existing, I actually have a pointer. Compared.
All right.
I'm not sure it'll work on the LED screen. Might not work. Nope, it doesn't.
Oh no.
Some do, some don't.
Let me know when you wanna. I'm doing it.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So we did 4 test cuts around the building on the south face and the west face. Concrete block is the first one you see over here on the left. That's the substrate, the backing behind the eaves. And then framing, you see the yellow, that's sheathing that's on metal studs on this south facade. So different conditions. That's a head of a window. And you can see the mastic that was used, the adhesive that was used to hold the eaves. Really, you're supposed to do that in vertical. I don't know why they did it in horizontal as well, but you know, that was a long time ago. The top photo in the middle is head flashing over your windows on the southern facade, caulked not to let water out. The bottom image on the right is where the concrete block meets the framed substrate, and supposed to be a bit of flashing at the bottom there where it goes over the concrete block veneer. Missing that. It was designed that way, but it's not. It wasn't constructed that way. The second picture from the left, I guess in the middle. There are different conditions where on the southern facade where the bottom plate of the metal framing goes past the floor slab. In one instance it goes past about 1 inch, in another instance it's inset about 1 inch, and there's no flashing. So definitely water stays on that back facade and more than likely goes into the crawl space and eventually dries out. And like I told the mayor earlier with Aaron and Eric and Kyle, probably don't have any issues right now because the southern facade gets hot and sunny and it's full blast sun. So if there is any moisture that's back there, it gets dried out pretty quickly. But I guess next slide. So this was really quick. We had a couple different recommendations. Recommendation 1 is sort of the come back and seal. And you can see, you just read the bullet points. Come back and seal the existing with a water resistant coating. But also do some things that upgrade the aesthetic. So you've got open louvers on the south facade that originally this building was designed to be an open vented attic. And that was problematic. If any of you guys have been out here a long time, you've probably heard the stories, but since then it's been spray foamed, closed. So there really is no function to those louvers. So I was recommending we just take them out and frame it in and eaves over it, close it in, add a new asphalt roof with more appropriate gutters and downspouts. I mean, you've got residential downspouts and gutters on the south side right now. Basically, if you look next door to the public safety building, Joe Baker, who helped on that redo of that roof, is working on this as well. So we would intend to match similar to that that building. Same thing with the soffit and the fascia. Replace the existing with a more of a cementitious, longer lasting, less maintenance. Sealant replacement. So that's saying that's not going in and redoing flashing. It's going in and taking out existing sealant and putting in new sealant where it's you can really see it down at the water table, which is the concrete block. It's like a rusticated base with concrete block. There's it's really broken and dried out sealant, so that would be included. And then an alternate doing a standing seam roof, standing seam metal roof, which you can see next door. You've got that condition as well. I think that solution. It's not permanent. I mean, you could still have water behind the eaves, and like I said, you've got some horizontal mastic, so waters can't drain. I mean, that's a big problem with eaves is when it was done in the 80s, you got to let the water out. And when you caulk the head of flashing and you do horizontal adhesive where water can't come down in a drainage plane, it tends to stay behind the eaves. But with a waterproof coating, water resistant coating that we're recommending on recommendation 1, you have a new aesthetic. It look, give it a nice upgrade, nice refresh, and it buys you some time. I think you'll see in this next recommendation. I think it's probably the what you do, the perfect solution. But yeah, so this is a recommendation 1, basically keeping the everything existing. We've closed in the louvers on that south facade. We've added new gutters and downspouts, and we painted it, refreshed it. Of course, the color would be go back and forth with you guys on color selection. But it's not a permanent solution, but it is a solution that buys you some time.
How much time approximately?
So I mean, we had that discussion too. I mean, I can't say 100%. I mean, you might have some issues in the wall. You haven't really had any yet on this southern exposure, and I think it's because of the sun. I think the sun is drying it out so fast. If you do notice something, it's probably going to be on the south wall, just because there's so many. That's where all the windows are, and the flashing's closed in. So, I mean, it could be 5 years, it could be 15 years, it could be 20 years. I can't tell you with any 100% certainty that's what it's going to be. I mean, you might find something above the window head next week, and that's what could happen because moisture does that sometimes. But there've been heavy rains. There've been heavy rains here, and I mean, we haven't noticed anything since the interior renovation, have we? So, it's totally up to you guys, but I think it's a good solution, especially if you don't have what's in recommendation 2, which is the next recommendation. I think the design was okay. It was designed as a drained eaves system so that water could get behind the eaves, the exterior insulation system, and come out. It was designed so it would come out, but it was built so that it was a closed system, so that water stays behind the eaves and doesn't come out. it eventually comes out. It probably comes out in a couple places, either at the first floor slab or into the crawl space. So the way to redo it, to fix it correctly, and you see that in the first bullet point, is to take it all off. And that's it's a big undertaking. And it's nasty. When you remove eaves, foam goes all over the place. I mean, it's just what happens. I mean, you try to get containment, and the specifications would say you try to contain it to this area, that kind of thing. But it's a big job. Some of the sheathing, you saw the yellow sheathing. We could tell on the southern exposure in a couple of test cuts had been moist before. So the idea is to replace all that sheathing, at least have a unit cost to replace any that's been damaged. Add a fluid applied water barrier. There's not a weather barrier right now around the building. And do the same thing that we're going to do for recommendation 1 with the vented soffit, the sealant replacement, but you'd also have flashing replacement as well. Standing seam metal roof. The unknown with this one, which is why it could go higher, is the unknowns of dealing with all the windows. Because right now the eaves just returns, and there's no air and water barrier in the jambs or at the heads or the seal. So, after we just did this interior renovation, you potentially have to take out the windows to redo the air and water barrier, so it's a completely sealed system to the air and water barrier, and then put whatever coating you want to have back on, whether it's hardy or stucco or a variety of different exterior veneers. I think eventually you're going to have to do something like this. Budget for it for maybe 20 years from now. Eventually you're going to have to do something to the exterior. It certainly needs a refresh now. I mean, I'm sure people can see that, but in terms of the function that you can't see, it will need to get redone with the water carry-off system. So that's sort of a budget number, and I got that from working with another exterior waterproofing guy, building envelope specialist, and a contractor. So I'm not a contractor, so I can't tell you I'm not going to do it for that, but it's pretty real numbers. And then the next slide is, it came across kind of fuzzy, but so you can see in the sort of the 3 tower elements that shows hardy plank. It's showing hardy plank siding and stucco between, so you could potentially come back and take off the 4-inch concrete block veneer at the crawl space and replace the exterior veneer with something maybe more island appropriate, that kind of thing. But that's just an option. I mean, there'd be many options available, but that's it. I guess if you'd ask for my recommendation, 100% my recommendation would be to redo it, but I understand budgets, and, if it were my money, I probably would look at recommendation 1 as well. In terms of, looking down the road and saving, I think it would be smart if you saved and budgeted for recommendation 2 eventually. But then you think about how long you're going to be in a building. I mean, are you going to be in it for 50 years? You plan on it being in it for another 50 years? That's totally up to you guys. So that's my 2 cents. Are there any questions, you guys?
Which roof would you recommend out of recommendation 1?
So the asphalt shingles are the cheaper way to go. But standing seam metal roof you have at the public safety here, and it looks nice. It adds a little bit of cost, but it does add a nice aesthetic to the exterior, and especially on this facade, you'll see it. So, I mean, if you can afford it, the standing seam metal roof is a nice little addition.
As far as repairing, which is the shingle roof is better.
Shingle roof's just cheaper.
It's cheaper,
It's
right.
just cheaper, yeah. You got shingles now.
Right.
Either one is fine. And I would suspect that we probably have to do a unit cost for any wood sheathing on that roof too, if there's any replacement or anything necessary. Just not sure about that condition because you can't see it until you take the existing off. Yes, ma'am.
All right, I just want to rephrase this.
Okay.
There seems to be a short-term solution, a long-term solution.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this would be a one-shot, short-term. When you look at the other one, the second one, which is that something that goes across one budget year, two, but I need more about the longer one. I get the short.
I mean, I guess that the longer one, I mean, you guys determine how much you want. If you could save $50,000 a year for how many years until you get it, draws interest, whatever.
But for you, your time frame.
Oh no, my time frame, I could do.
One time.
One time.
You ready to check?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not going to be involved with it for 20 years.
Yeah, you read my mind.
I will if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You read
You have to figure out.
he read my mind.
Y'all got to figure out the money.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do either one with you.
Yep.
Not a problem.
Okay. All right. So that's all I wanted to know as far as the finance. So okay.
And I'm pennies compared to this stuff. So
Right.
it's this is a big decision for you guys. I mean, I get it.
Right, but you gave us two.
I
in
gave
all
you two, yes,
fairness.
ma'am.
Okay. One is to maintain
Right,
and sustain. The other is to fix.
right.
Bottom line.
Totally bottom line. And that's for you guys to determine. Do you want to fix something and thinking you're going to be here for another 50 to 75 years, or do you want to maintain it thinking you might think about building something new in another 15 to 25 years?
Thank you.
Anything
It
else?
sounds as if most, if not all, the focus is on the southern and eastern exposures. of the building.
Western. Those were the
Western.
test cuts.
Okay. Well, of course, there are windows on the front.
Yep.
So is there any consideration for the entire building?
Yeah. So both recommendations would deal with the entire building. It's just the eastern front is similar to the southern front because it's a framed construction, and then the northern front is similar to the western front because it's concrete block. Now the northern front, in both schemes, I'd say let's don't tear the eaves off. It's a firewall, and you don't have good access to it. So I would recommend just doing the waterproof, water resistant coating over the northern facade. And it's going to be hard to get to some of that area anyways, even down here. I mean, you've got some areas that are 2 inches away from the eave of the adjacent property owner. Not really sure how that happened, but it is there. So yeah, we definitely looked down. The test cuts were the only areas we did test cuts on the west and south.
Okay. If we were starting over, how appropriate is stucco, the use of stucco in coastal environments? I know in certain areas it's very problematic with mold and such.
EIFS is not a problem if it's done right. That's the problem, that a lot of contractors didn't install it properly, and a lot of designers didn't design it properly. So water has to get out. If it's designed, and there are new EIFS systems that have third-party inspections, and they're a lot more involved than what you guys have. Y'all basically have a piece of foam that was glued to the wall, with no air and water barrier. Like a liquid applied, or even just like a Tyvek. You've seen that everywhere. Y'all don't have that here. I think where you come out smelling like a rose is that you get so much natural sun that beats on the building and dries out the moisture that gets behind the eaves. And probably almost immediately on the southern side, southern and western probably.
Whereas this side of the building looks discolored.
It's discolored, and it probably gets a lot of moisture, but it's a block wall. So that's the best scenario, because a block wall is gonna take a lot more moisture to actually come through to have moisture infiltration so that it shows up on the finished side of the wall than a framed wall. So the framed wall, if the frame wall was on the northern facade, I can almost guarantee that you'd see some issues, because the north facade stays wet probably because it doesn't get much light, much sun.
Did you notice any dampness in the crawl space at all?
No, honestly,
Okay.
not. And when we did the interior renovation, you guys, and I've told everybody that I could, when you guys did the interior renovation, you were smart. You went ahead and put it out for bid when everybody else was not doing any bids. I've told Eric multiple times, that was, you guys, more so than a lot of other agencies, state agencies, local higher education people, projects were put on hold, but you guys went forward with it. And what we have, I think 20 different contractors wanted to bid on this project. So you got a great bid. And where I'm going with that is your bid came in under the base bid estimate that we had given. So you had money to do work in the crawl space. And we did a lot of work in the crawl space. So you encapsulated the structure.
That's what I was gonna ask.
And we added a thick millage plastic on the ground to help prevent, moisture
Sump pumps and.
coming up. There's no sump pump.
Okay.
Because if you do have a flood, the water needs to be able to go somewhere underneath, and it'll equalize. Otherwise, you have hydrostatic pressure and ruin the structure. But no, it was fine, and now it's clean down there. I mean, they cleaned out all the trash, and it's sprayed, so I can almost guarantee you're saving money on your energy bills.
Thank you.
This is a question maybe more for Joe. If the building was designed one way and built another way, is any of those shortcomings actionable to get any money back?
Statute of limitations is long.
When was it built?
94, I think. Yeah.
I think the statute it's problematic at this point. I mean, Eves is, I don't know if y'all are familiar.
It's a cuss word. It's a
whole litigation industry.
So
I don't mind telling you.
Yeah, it is.
There is a right way to do it. I'd be curious if you know of any buildings of this size where it was put on the right way.
So there's a stigma against it. I tell you, but they're products like a stove product, a stove Eve system. It's a great system. Clients tend to shy away from them because of all the lawsuits.
To your question, Mr. Folly, I think the city would be liable in some of that because I'm sure if the building was built, our building inspector had to sign off for it at the time.
And I think there's a statute of repose, 15-year statute of repose, I want to say, which is a hard cutoff. Statute of limitations don't usually start until you know that there's a problem. And then you have 3 years. Again, I don't know if there's some specialty for construction because they fool around with it because of these issues, but that's pretty old.
Okay. Yeah. And you haven't had issues with it, which, you kind of want to be able to show that you've had some problem with it. But it fascinates me that there haven't been issues because, exactly. I mean, basically you sealed everything up against the wall, and whatever moisture gets behind the wall, there's no way for it to get out. But it hasn't caused a problem. The thing about recommendation 1 that would help, it would be a water resistant coating. So you could put a BASF or a stove water resistant that's not an elastomeric, it's still breathable, but to help with the aesthetic and give it a little bit more water resistance.
I appreciate
Anything
it.
else? We good?
We're gonna have to move on a little bit.
Yeah, y'all go ahead.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so the commercial zoning ordinances, we've had a lot of discussion, at the staff, council, and planning commission levels. Based on the conversations and feedback that we've gotten from all of our discussions, staff prepared, two alternative maps. The first alternative is what you guys are familiar with and what you've seen for all of the, previous conversations. Alternative 2 is based on feedback that we got based on some public comment and internal discussions. So major changes, and in the memo on page 11, alternative 2 should say that the 5 parcels on Center Street between Ashley and Arctic would remain island commercial, and they're shown correctly on the map. Just a little word swap there on my memo. And then alternative 2 also shows some movement of the commercial area, so east and west kind of mirror each other. So those are the 2 map alternatives for council to consider. And then there are 2 ordinance language alternatives. They have not been changed in the draft ordinances that are in your packet, but wanted to make the suggestion to have 5-foot setbacks instead of 10-foot setbacks. That was based on some feedback that we got from some architects. And then keeping single-family residential and duplexes as allowable uses in the island commercial, and that would allow some residents to build homes on the lots that they've had plans for. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. February, I guess Aaron would bring this to you guys to remand to planning.
Is the wording changing alternative 2? Did you say there was a wording change in alternative 2?
Yeah, so where it says, would keep Center Street lots between Ashley and Arctic downtown commercial, it should say island commercial, because they are currently, island commercial, and they would stay island commercial. So just change downtown to island. But just would love some conversation about what map alternative you guys find more appealing, and to remand to planning next month, and then the ordinance language alternative suggestions, and if you think they should be incorporated into the draft ordinances at all.
Just to kind of piggyback on what Katie said, part of the ordinance process is you put something out, you get feedback, you make adjustments. Planning Commission is going to hold public hearings on this. They're going to get more feedback from it when they send it back to you, their report. It could have proposed amendments. This is just a summary of what we've gotten back from folks so far today, so that if these themes of public comment resonate with you guys, and you know that you're headed that way, and then you agree with the public comment today, we can go ahead and incorporate those changes into the version that gets remanded, so that wheel isn't reinvented at the public hearing. Or we can send it as is, and all that feedback can be channeled to the Planning Commission, and they can make those recommendations. And they're kind of two separate categories: the rezonings, which would change the zoning district boundaries, and the actual text of the regulations.
As for the zoning boundaries, my preference, and based on conversations I've had with some concerned citizens, property owners, would be to continue the red downtown commercial. First block of East Ashley all the way to Burns, at least on the north side of the road, if not both sides.
So that is what is currently zoned.
Island commercial, I thought.
So you're talking from here down to Burt's. It is currently zoned downtown commercial, and so you would
Retain
say
that,
you
correct.
would say that.
Yeah, retain that and then extend potentially downtown commercial to include
The sand.
the block in between
Rita's.
Ashley and Arctic. And then when we're ready, I have a comment or two about the text.
I would prefer alternative two, with the exception of, Mr. Barber's point, extending the downtown commercial to Arctic in alternative two.
How about alternative one, which would be exactly what you said?
He likes the residential two-family between Second and Third West. But then extending downtown commercial down to Revis.
Well, isn't that what alternate one does? That's what you just said, downtown commercial goes all the way to Arctic?
Yes, sir. He likes this. So this is
Oh,
residential.
that will
Mhm, yes, sir.
Okay, excuse me, I missed that.
That's all right.
Alternative two A.
So to kind of break those down, just, so I feel like a common comment is that the downtown commercial district, whichever the boundaries end up to be, should definitely include the center street lots between Ashley and Arctic.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then the idea for downtown commercial is that it operates differently than the rest of the commercial district. So downtown commercial has no parking requirements proposed, different stories, lot coverage at grade. So it is operating differently than that extension down East Ashley.
Yeah, so I agree with the party. I like zoning map 2A, which would be 2 with the addition of the red down to Arctic. Personally.
And a follow-up thought with regard to, and I certainly agree with 2A, retaining downtown commercial for the first block of East Ashley route to Burt's would be, if we were to adopt at least what we've proposed thus far, I know there's a concern that we could have more quote-unquote wiki-wikis or what is now Tapaboy. And in fact, that couldn't happen because what we're proposing be required, I believe, is no more than 2 stories. And if you build at grade, at ground level, you can go up 1 story. And if you visualize what is there now in the form of wiki-wiki, they have a half level where they have seating that's maybe 10 feet up. Then they have.
But you would also be building. You'd also be able to build what's being built now, which is the driving force of the whole thing. These duplex systems that are just short-term rentals.
Correct, which I think we'll still address in the text. But in the context of that former wiki structure, we've got outdoor seating at 10 feet. We've got 2 bars and indoor seating at, call it 18 feet. There's another story that a lot of people don't even realize exists, which is really for private parties. Then there's a rooftop bar and deck. Nothing like that could ever be built again in terms of its massing, what have you, if we were to pass at least what has been proposed, whereby they can build on 2 stories, ground and 1 above, or elevated, and then 2 stories from there, with conceivably parking or storage below. So I don't have any concerns that we would see more wiki-like structures in a future state if we were to retain that as downtown commercial.
But we would see more what's going on, what we're trying to get away from is more duplex buildings and short-term rentals.
Yeah,
downtown commercial, that's the problem. That's the problem we're facing now. So unless you change all the downtown commercial where you don't have residential in it, you're going right back to where you were.
Except for in this case, again, retaining just that first block of East Ashley. So all the other constraints, whereby we're moving a block or so in either direction of the center into the residential single-family neighborhoods, fully supportive of that no longer being red, that it be island commercial. But to me, and I know to others, that first block of East Ashley does feel and function like a downtown corridor. At least the properties are fronting that street, not what's behind it, but certainly what's fronting.
That's a longer discussion later,
Sure.
I'm sure.
Mr. Pope, this is just this is just a process question. Okay, so you've got our preliminary feedback as a council. It gets remanded to planning. It comes back to us. Thank you.
So, yes, ma'am. Planning will have to hold public hearings to take official comment.
Thank you.
I would not favor extending the downtown commercial to Burt's, but I would favor the ordinance changes you reflect here, reducing the setback and keeping SFR and duplex as uses in the island commercial.
Is that everything on the map? I'll just throw a couple things out there with regard to the text. Okay, in the context of the text, I know in the future state where we convert what is now downtown commercial in the residential single-family neighborhoods to island commercial, with the requirement that if there is to be short-term rentals, call it on the second story, that there be a business located in the ground level. Something for staff to consider, I've seen this happen elsewhere, is where it's sort of an end around or gaming. The builder puts in a storefront, 200, 300 square feet, hopes to be able to rent it, never ends up renting it, and they've got 3 or 4 short-term rentals above and behind. You might want to consider that scenario in which somebody, again, built a small space that was going to be a tattoo parlor, it was going to be an ice cream shop, and they really don't care. It's in the economics. They're still better off, renting 3 or 4 rooms as short-term rental, even though they complied, they got the CO, and we had empty storefronts back into our residential neighborhoods. I know there was also a concern expressed that it might feel odd to have a single-family home, new construction that contains 3 or 4 short-term rentals, along with the required storefront, whether occupied or not, residential single-family home, and then so on and so forth. One thing we might want to consider, could in the process kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and maybe feel more appropriate in the neighborhoods, is rather than require a commercial entity on the ground level, require at least one of the units, likely 1 unit, be reserved for long-term rental in each of these buildings.
So in the commercial districts, residential at grade is prohibited. So there could be no residential units at grade.
Okay.
That's from a building and code standard. So there can be no residential at grade. Anything residential has to be elevated. So the space underneath it couldn't be around. And as written, it's 1 residential unit over a commercial space. And that could be a 1, 3, 4 bedroom over a commercial space, but it doesn't allow multiple residential units over a commercial space.
It's 1 rental reservation, so they get 1 business license. It may be a 3-bedroom apartment, but it's only 1 rental reservation. We're not allowing residential multifamily, so it would be 1 commercial, 1 residential. Standard lots would allow for 2 of those uses, so you could have 2 businesses, 2 apartments, but at max you would only have 2 short-term rental units. Could be 6 bedrooms total, but it's still 2 families, 2 reservations max at a time, with the licensing and everything.
So for new construction, anything at grade is either empty for parking or it's a commercial. And if you want to build something at grade, it has to be a commercial space.
It would be flood-proof.
And that's how it is today. You can't build any residential at grade.
Okay. So if at grade, if on ground level we're parking, and there were 2 stories of quote unquote livable space,
So that would be the duplex.
which we would permit in the future state of island commercial zoning.
If this ordinance language alternative B on the memo is incorporated, then yes, duplexes would be allowed in island commercial. Right now, standalone residential uses would not be permitted in downtown commercial, as those front Center Street. You don't want a single family home.
So if we're gonna allow B in island commercial, we might as well just split this all away and don't do anything. That's what you got now. That's exactly what we're trying to get away from, what you got now.
And one way to, another way to get at it is if we do allow single family and duplexes to be built, we would have to prohibit short-term rental as allowable use. So we say to the homeowner who's has a piece of property and they wanna build their family duplex, yes, you can build a duplex here, but it has to be a residence, it can't be used as a short-term rental.
If your residence long-term rental.
It does change things, because a single family would just be, of course, the one house, but a duplex would be, to Mr. Barker's, if you built a business and then a living quarters and a living quarters, that would be the duplex, and that means the lot's done.
So you would only be able to do 1-to-1, so one residential unit for one commercial unit, you wouldn't be able to have a duplex over a commercial, unless you had two commercial entities.
Okay. So on a lot, on a street-to-street lot, you could have, a business, and a residence, but that's it. You couldn't have a quadruplex or a duplex over it, so it does change it where you wouldn't be able to have the multiplex resident only on the thing, you'd be limited to.
Not if you keep B to allow duplexes, but allowable use.
But it
Then
sounds
you're
like,
right back where you are today.
it sounds like you could still have, and I haven't considered this, if you had two small businesses at grade, you could have 2 units above.
Right.
One over each
One
one.
each.
Right.
That would be allowable now as it's, in the amended ordinance.
So even though they're in separate buildings, they're called duplexes, because it's 2 on one lot.
It would actually be two different, the use is, residential over non-residential, so that's one use, and then you could have 2 of those uses based on the density in our dimensional table.
Which is significantly different than what's happening now.
With
Because-
single family and a duplex on the same lot, which is considered multifamily. That would not be allowed.
And what we've seen crop up beside low life and beside the post office, those are considered multiplex, like 4 units.
It's 3 units, yes, sir. It's a single family and a duplex on each lot. So there's 3, it ends up being like 12 bedrooms on each lot, but 3 short-term rental licenses can go to each property.
Which, right,
Yeah.
we don't want. So is there a way to weave in a consideration, again, the focus has been business with residential above, but long-term rental paired with short-term rental, instead of commercial paired with short-term rental? Because I know that, obviously, that's a problem we've been trying to solve for years, particularly in the context of affordable housing. It'd be even better if we could weave in affordable long-term rental when we issue a building permit that's going to include what we know to be a short-term rental.
Yeah, what you call affordable, because affordable doesn't mean cheap.
No, I understand. I understand.
Well, I mean, but people out there don't understand that.
Just food
You're
for thought.
getting-
Not a problem we're going to solve for today,
Yeah.
but just
No.
plant the seed, socialize the idea.
To designate that you've got to have a long-term rental would be kind of far reaching into people's property rights, I would think. You know, I mean, kind of like spot zoning almost, I would think, but that's just something to think about.
Mayor, so I think I move on to the next.
Please.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing? I wonder, like, talking about Adam's proposal as far as, maybe we offer a third alternative, that keeps the downtown commercial, extending to Burt's, but only there. And just to create that conversation in planning commission, and then the rest, kind of sits back to alternative 2, where everything else behind Center Street is island commercial, except for the, between those that face Ashland. So maybe that's something to submit as a third thing. And one thing, as far as the language goes, I think the mayor hit it, and that we have to figure out, and this is a conversation in planning, is, what do we want? Do we want more businesses for our residents? Or do we want more, short-term rentals in our commercial district that doesn't necessarily serve everyone? But I do think that, that little strip around East Ashley, it is pretty commercial. And maybe we leave it that way for now, and it's something we watch and, make a change as needed. But for now, we're at least protecting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 sections. And, to see how, that falls once we're done. So I think it could be worth a discussion, for February.
But when you protect those 4 sections, and my section is 5, why don't you protect mine?
Well, if you're looking at, the number of businesses that are currently there, you're kind of, you're going down the street and you're counting all of those, and that, let's try this, and then if we, need to make adjustments, you certainly can. None of this is set in stone, but I think it's at least worth a conversation, as we're looking at options and what.
But what I'm saying is, on the other side of the street, why don't you let me have the same downtown commercial? But you got island commercial paying here on East Ashland, going down there. You protect the one across the street from me, why don't you protect mine on the other side?
Well, I think it would.
Because there's businesses on that side.
But they're already island commercial.
But I'm just saying, but if you're protecting these in your thought process, downtown commercial, why don't you change this to protect mine across the street, which is already commercial at commercial lots?
Okay, so take out the word protect and just say, let's leave island commercial where it is between Center and Arctic.
But if you're changing these, if you're changing the scheme, why don't you change it so you get me too?
Well, that's something people can come to planning and discuss, but I think it's worth, putting it out there to talk about.
It's actually not changing it, it's leaving it how it is.
Yeah.
Again, I have a question for Mr. Pope. Okay, so we're giving you feedback. We go back to planning. We can attend as council people, planning, and listen to it. We don't engage, but we can listen to what the people want. That's my question. It's all now about future process and coming back to us.
So if you're legally required, as planning commission, they have one public hearing and send it back to you guys with recommendations, and you can take the lead. That's just the bare minimum.
Yep.
We can go to planning commission for a public hearing, they can take it forward. After that, we can schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more public hearings or joint work sessions with the council.
Okay.
You're legally required to have one public hearing or 2 readings. Beyond that, you can joint work session, hold multiple public hearings, hold town halls. You can stretch it out for as long as you like.
Well, nothing's gonna happen for a month.
That's why I'm talking, yeah.
So, nothing's gonna go to plan.
Exactly.
So, we need to move on.
So on page 24 is the zoning ordinance clerical amendments. We talked about this at the last council meeting. Number 3 is what Mr. Barker pointed out. We went through the ordinance and found 11 total. I believe these will be separate ordinances that will be remanded to planning to go through and look at everything, basically correcting the zoning ordinance to match what we're actually administering. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but just, are there any questions? 1 through 11?
And the essence of this is that each one of these things will require an ordinance. Some of them go to planning, some not, but each one of these ideas would need to be presented to you guys in an ordinance form for you to consider when we have more time.
It's gonna be a couple of long meetings.
Grant updates, there are 3 grant programs, the PARD grant, the LWCF, and the HNGP that are all in the works. One actually I'm submitting on Friday for the construction of the knee wall along East Indian at Folly River Park. That'll be phase 2. Cost of construction way more expensive we had to phase it. So we're getting another about $5,200 for that. LWCF is looking at some potential land acquisition. I think Eric is reaching out to property owners to see that. We just put a letter of intent to keep our options open, no guarantees, but that could be a fun opportunity for the city. And then we are working on some shoulder improvements at 2nd West and Arctic, where PETAC just went in to reduce some localized flooding. And so those are all in the work, and just wanted to let you guys know what I've been up to. No problem.
Okay. So who's gonna do the doc?
Andrew volunteers.
Ooh, I thought Andrew.
Andrew, come up with questions. The condensed version of the doc is that 2 years ago, we decided to put a marine rescue launch dock at the boat landing. We went through, we got our OCRM permit, we got the dock designed, we put it out to bid. It came in, probably like $40,000.
Yeah,
About $40,000 more than we had in the bank for it. It was not, we did not receive multiple bids, we only got one bid. So since we only got one bid and it was so much more than we had budgeted, we decided to put it out again to see if we can attract more interest and get some more competition. And if we come back and we get 6 bids and they're all $40,000 over, then we'll know that maybe we need to rethink how much money we've allocated to that project.
Anderson, you got a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. So this week we got a report from the insurance trust, summarizing our past year, with our insurance claims and incidents. And, we only had 2 this year, total, current losses of only 166. Our loss ratio went down from 57% to 0.16%, so that was a fantastic year for us. We only had 2 claims, none from Public Works, none from, the police department, which I think really highlights the efforts from Kyle Sullivan, Eric Lutz, and all the guys in our field. That's going to really help our premiums going forward. So I just wanted at least to highlight their efforts. We have some information for you on the breakdown of the incidents. Both of them were fairly minor. And let's see. Lastly, we have just a breakdown of our premiums for 2022. We expect for 2022 they're going to go down because of the great year that we had, and it has a also on page 8 here you have a breakdown of how our modifier going down can help us save money in the future.
So tell us why we were so great. I mean, truly, I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing. So can you just give us just a quick, why?
Sure. So I think Kyle and Eric, they do a great job of keeping the guys always focused on safety. We try to do monthly safety trainings each month, and so I just think that they've done a good job of keeping the guys aware, and the guys do a great job themselves of being aware of their surroundings and keeping themselves safe.
Thank you.
In the public safety department too.
That's right. Yeah, public safety department as well. We did have one incident with fire department, but it was also minor.
Amazing. Thank you.
It was a good year. Congratulations to everybody. Hey, and don't forget, it's not just the guys that are on a truck or in a car, but then you also have a real potential for injuries in and around the office building. One of the worst injuries that I saw happen to a guy, I didn't see it personally, but heard about it later on after it happened. His brother worked for a company, the DuPont, in Nashville, Tennessee, the old Hickory plant. And his brother was standing in the doorway with his hand in the door frame, talking to somebody in the hallway. And the other brother got up from his desk and slammed the door shut and cut the end of his finger off. So, things that happen in your office areas just as bad. So the office group have safety meetings and safety talks too, so it's good all the way around.
Well run.
Okay. Thank you very much. We got 5 minutes. And we'll be right back.
Go for it.
Yeah, it just has to be like planning and zoning and stuff. Yes, sir. Must love your beat.